I would like to acknowledge that this video is being filmed on the traditional lands of the Wurrundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people who may be watching this video today. Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share with you the comics that I have on my shelf. Or more importantly, the comics or the graphic novels or bind-ups and things that are just important to me. It's not often that I talk about DC or Marvel comics specifically on my channel anymore, and I tend to go in waves of when there are like time periods where I'll read a bunch of them and I'll collect a bunch of them and I'll read them and then I'll put them on my shelf, and then I go through stages where I don't necessarily read them, which is where I currently am at the moment. I just thought it would be nice to share some of the things that I have collected over the years, why I've collected them, who some of my favourite characters are, which is generally why I collect particular volumes. And I keep thinking I should get back into it, and then I get very overwhelmed by trying to figure out what's going on. So, which is why I'm now stalking Ashley's new channel, because she's talking about comics and graphic novels and all of that sort of stuff. I'll leave the link to Realm of Comics down below so you can check it out if you're not already following her. It's great. But yeah, it kind of inspired me just to go through my shelves and pull out some favourite things. Now, I wish I could sit on the floor and actually sit in front of the shelf. It is one of the bottom shelves because these things are heavy, so I had to put them on the bottom shelf. But yeah, it's not currently in the most accessible part of my bookshelf, in that there's about 1.5 feet between the end of my bed and the bookshelves have doors, so I can't actually maneuver myself onto the floor. But I'll give you a very quick overview and then I'm going to pull some books off the shelf and share them with you. Okay, so apologies for the very weird angle, because I actually cannot get down there and film at the same time. So on my shelf I have all of my Batman and DC comics, I have my Marvel comics, and then any other assortment of things that I could possibly have. So I'm going to pull some of these off and talk a little bit about why they're on my comic shelves. Alright, so you saw the overview and I've pulled some things off the shelf. There are other graphic novels and comic titles elsewhere in my collection, but this is the majority of them and the majority of the Marvel and the DC stuff. That said, I do have 3 sort of young adult comic / graphic novel titles that are by Australian Indigenous authors. So there's 3 of them. I actually bought these as a pack when I found out that they came out. I have to say they're not necessarily the type of comic that I would normally read, but I really wanted to support these authors and to make sure that I could share them with people, and I have both here and at work, because I think it's important to share those First Nations voices in lots of different mediums. So there is Mixed Feelings, and this one is about a girl who's raised by her uncle and she really struggles to fit in, and she is visited by Phantom in her dreams. This one is quite a dark comic, so it's not for younger YA audiences. There is Storm Warning, which is about 2 friends whose lives cross paths again at the start of a massive storm, and this storm really leads to a chain of events unfolding that they have to work their way through. And then Exodimensions is a really interesting one because this one focuses on Central Australian and Indigenous stories. It features mutants and cyborgs and clones and deals with emotional trauma and emotional wounds and family and all of that, and is a very interesting story to dive into. I actually need to revisit these 3 again at some point because I haven't gone back to them in a little while, and to unpack them a little bit more. I do have 3 image titles. I have Saga Volume 1. I think everyone knows about Saga, and I have the first physical copy, but I think I've read the first couple of volumes of this and I need to go back and read more because I know it's very beloved. I also have Descender Volume 1. This one I did really enjoy. I like stories with androids and all of that sort of stuff. So again, another series I need to go back. This was a point, and with the next one, where I picked up titles that were really popular and people were talking about, and then I never got a chance to really continue the series because I kind of got swept up in other things. So these are all still stories that I would like to continue at some point. And also Monstrous Volume 1. Again, this artwork is just incredible and creepy, and I'm here for it. Maybe we'll start with Marvel, because I did get into Marvel first. And part of that was because I watched the X-Men animated TV show, and that stuck with me. And then at some point as a kid, I read these junior fiction, middle grade-y titles featuring those characters. So these were these books. They're novels, they're not graphic novels, and they're adaptations of classic comic titles. So there's Days of Future Past, Second Genesis, Wolverine Top Secret, and the Xavier Files. And these were, yeah, like I said, I read them as a kid and then I forgot about them, and then I found them, and you better believe I bought them. And like, these are so old and yellow and whatever, but I bought, they're part of my reading history, so I have them. And eventually it prompted me to go on and to read the actual Days of Future Past. The first thing you need to know about me in X-Men is that I'm a huge Kitty Pryde fan, and basically if there's a storyline with Kitty Pryde, I want it. So I'm not quite sure what's happened with her character in recent years, but you know, back when I was reading all of these, I'm like, give me all of these. That's all I want to read is her character. I find her deeply fascinating. I liked that you had a young, very, very intelligent female character who had an impact on storylines, and I just deeply appreciated that. Of course, that prompted me to pick up Mechanics, which is part of the Extreme X-Men series. This was a grown-up Kitty Pryde dealing with the world and having to make her way on her own. This is still one of my favorite stories. I did also continue with some more of the Extreme X-Men volumes. So there was Prisoner of Fire and also God Loves, Man Kills, where Kitty features quite heavily in these stories. Likewise, I have Kitty Pryde Shadow and Flame. I think this was 5 volumes. Yeah, 5 volumes following her, and just absolutely loved it. Then I also was, like, I have quite a few, well, I have some single issue comics. So there was Uncanny X-Men 168. I was also very intrigued by her relationship with Wolverine, which I thoroughly enjoyed, because in the animated series, the relationship was between Wolverine and Jubilee. But in the comics, Wolverine was a mentor to Kitty, and I enjoyed that. But I'd never read that original story series. So there is the Kitty Pryde and Wolverine. I think this is 6 issues. And I do have them. I have actually read them. They do come out of these plastic covers. I only have the plastic covers because that's how they arrived to me when I bought them secondhand. Another storyline that I was very fascinated by with Kitty was the Pride and Wisdom series, which is quite controversial because she's quite young and in a relationship with an older guy. And I haven't gone back to reread it, so I don't know where I feel about it now, but you know, maybe that's where my love of age gap romances came from. But that was the series that explored that romance. And then I also have Parting Glances, which is part of Excalibur, which is where I think that relationship ended. But again, I haven't revisited these in a while, so it's probably time for me to do that. And then if we're thinking about DC Comics, I am a huge fan of the Bat family. I find Batman as a character deeply, deeply fascinating, possibly because at one point I read this book, and I probably should have pulled it out. I don't know where it's gone. A book about Batman and psychology, and it really looked at Batman as a character and how all of the villains and the heroes around Batman impacted on him and his character. And I ate that book up. Like, I don't often read nonfiction books, but that one was really interesting. But I'm also a huge Barbara Gordon fan. If you can't tell, I like strong female heroines, and I like it when they can beat up the boys. So Kitty Pryde and Barbara Gordon can definitely do that. I liked her in any iteration as Batgirl or as Oracle. I really loved her character. I'm always interested in her relationship with Batman in terms of their dynamic, because it's not always the smoothest in terms of partnerships, and I think they had to build up a lot of trust. And I also, one of my favorite pairings is Batgirl and Nightwing, and even though I know that it is not the healthiest of relationships ever, like, it is definitely not, but in my head they live rent-free as a favorite couple. If only I could rewrite some of those storylines. And then another character that I find really fascinating is Huntress, and so I have a whole stack of stories featuring all of those, and then of course the Joker, who is just like iconic. We'll start with Barbara because I collect a lot of Batgirl stories, but one of the things that I had to get into was the Birds of Prey with all female heroines, and I found that really, really delightful. And then I decided to start collecting as many of the volumes as I could. Mostly they're the Gail Simone run, and I love them. I want all the all-female superhero teams. That's just all I want from life. I also started with the Batgirl New 52 run as well, again because Gail Simone was writing them and I trust those stories. And this was fascinating because we see Batgirl post regaining use of her legs. And I remember it being controversial when it came out because having a physically disabled heroine who still was one of the most kick-ass heroines in comics is so important to me, and I love those stories more than I love these ones. hands down, because I think they're so important. But I was interested to see what they did with this storyline and how they made that work. So it's probably one that I need to go back and revisit, to be honest. They also did a young adult graphic novel, The Oracle Code, which was interesting. Probably not my favorite Barbara storyline, but definitely interesting, and I think a great way to introduce younger readers to her character. I have read all the Nightwing comics. This is the only one that I own that's from the original run. So this is Love and Bullets, but I did read all of them digitally, and I found this story really interesting as Dick Grayson leaves Gotham City and strikes out on his own, which I think was a really important story because he couldn't always stay in Batman's shadow and he had to make mistakes on his own, and that's what I really liked about that storyline. I think he grew as a character. I also have the Nightwing and Huntress miniseries, which was interesting. They're very brief interlude. Then I also got into the Huntress stories. So there's Huntress U1, which I really loved, and Huntress Cry for Blood. I liked that we had a heroine who was very morally grey. She's closer to Batman's character than any of the others in terms of the lengths that she'll go to, but she is more likely to cross the line than anyone else, and I found that very interesting to explore. Like, this video would not be complete without me talking about the Joker. I find the Joker stories especially fascinating because his relationship with Batman is just so complex, and like, the part of me that just wants to sit there and explore characters' psyches just loves these two characters in stories. Like, I can't. And I know that Ashley recently talked about there's a new series where they have to team up, and I have to read that. That's totally my thing, and you better believe I'm going to go and explore that. So you might hear about that soon. But I do have The Killing Joke, and this one is iconic and probably needs no introduction. It is the story where Joker goes to Commissioner Gordon's house intending to kill him, but ends up shooting Barbara Gordon, which is how she becomes paraplegic. One, I went back to read the story because I wanted the backstory for her, but also just became very, very intrigued by the story of the Joker and the relationship between him and Batman. There's also Joker by Brian Azzarello. Again, this one just explores the Joker's character, and it's about him crossing paths with all of the other villains from the universe as he gets out of prison, and it's just this look into the madhouse world that is the Joker. And also Batman 3 Jokers, again, was really interesting to look at these 3 different types of Jokers. And what I found interesting in this one is that you have Batman, who's chasing after these 3 Jokers, as well as Barbara Gordon and Jason Todd, who again is a very, very intriguing character for me. But I haven't spent a lot of time in Jason Todd's stories, but this one was so intriguing, and also to see Jason Todd and Barbara Gordon working together was very interesting. I don't necessarily read widely in the DC universe, but like, these 3 Joker stories are just standouts for me. I absolutely love them. And over the years, I've had some really good friends who sent me some gorgeous things. Like, I love this print of Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon. It is one of my all-time favorites. That same friend also sent me these ones, and this one, and also a Jean Grey one as Phoenix, because, no, also iconic. All right, so this was very haphazard, and hopefully it wasn't too out there. Oh, I know who I forgot. Hold on. And then also my little Bat family, because I love them. I've actually lost count of how many Barbara Gordon Batgirl Pop Funkos I have. They take up most of a shelf, but I keep all of these ones together because they all match. All right, so thank you for joining me for this very haphazard tour of my comics and some of the comics that have had, you know, an impact or been important in my comic reading journey. I haven't reread a lot of these in a while. I'm sorely tempted to do that. If there's any that you'd be interested in hearing me reread and vlog about or something like that, let me know. I know that this is not primarily a comic or graphic novel channel, but every now and then I do like to dip my toes into them. And I'm definitely going to be checking out that new Batman and Joker team up because I want it so badly. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Bye everyone.